Hey, everybody, guess who's still sharing Torah? Rabbi Chaim Coffman from Batar Lit in Israel. He's taken the time out of his busy schedule, still sharing Pirkei Avos with us, Ethics of the Fathers. I so enjoy this class. It's been, for me, a blessing to hear him share as it was taught to him and how close it is shared across the board with everybody. It's beautiful. You need to listen to this class closely. There's so much there for you to grow with. Without any delay, though, I'm going to turn it right over to Rabbi. His connection's a little fuzzy today, but I'm telling you, the message is coming through loud and clear. So, Rabbi Chaim, how are you? You've got the stage, sir. I'm going to turn it right over to you, and let's go from there.
Okay, so welcome everyone. We hope everyone's enjoying the Passover. By us, it's it's a lot of matzah, it's a lot of potatoes, right? There's only so many things you can do with the potato, right? So, it's potatoes, it's brownies, don't have eggs, but okay, we're making our way through. We're gonna have to go on a diet, shed a few pounds. So hopefully the Energizer Bunny will continue, and that'll be enough to at least shed off something for me. So we are in the 11th Mishnah in the first chapter, still working our way through. And Avtalion, remember I had Avtalion before, and he says, scholars shall be cautious with your words. They should be cautious, for you may incur the penalty of exile. Be banished to a place of evil waters. What's the place of evil waters? In the vernacular, we would call that heresy. We'll see. And we may not get off that topic, but okay. The disciples who follow you there may drink and die. Consequently, the name of heaven will be desecrated. So, obvious question is, what exactly does this mean, right? So, a person has to be careful, a scholar especially has to be careful with their words, because you do not want words to be misinterpreted, where people certainly could become heretics from them, right? We spoke before about the idea of learning from a proper rabbinical authority, right? Talmud tells us it has to be somebody who in your eyes is like an angel. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean they're perfect, right? But you look at them like an angel. So when a person speaks, and they have a tremendous responsibility, right? The responsibility to have proper student, that's for sure. And the responsibility to give over properly. Meaning to give over information where not only is the information going to be good, it should be good, but you don't want it misinterpreted. You do not want people to misinterpret it where they could become, heretics. So it could be, now you tell me, it says they may incur the penalty of exile, right? They may have to go to exile and be banished to a place of evil waters, right? Meaning that we're talking about a place where heretics are. Now, what happens? Now, obviously, probably not such a good thing. You put all, heretics in one place, no one's ever going to do tshuva, right? Who's going to want to repent? Who's going to want to, who's going to want to change, right? So maybe in this place, let's say there are no heretics, right? Maybe there are no heretics. So, therefore, if there are no heretics, you send them into such a place. You can make other people into heretics, and thereby having to go into exile. Now, this is a real serious problem, right? Because, here in Israel and other places, in the world, Orthodox Jews stick to themselves, right? Now, there are a few enclaves in New York, New Jersey, that most of the community where they live, there are Orthodox Jews, right? And there may be, some secular Jews interspersed. Maybe there are non-Jews. I mean, non-Jews certainly, outweigh Jews by huge margins. So you're not going to necessarily get away totally, from non-Jews. But nonetheless, Orthodox Jews stay to themselves. They stay insular. They have their own communities, right? Now, why is that? Because we don't want to hang out with secular Jews, right? It's obviously not going to be so popular. But, secular Jews have spiritual cooties, like, like, why? Why is that? Because their thoughts are heretical. Their ideas are heretical. What they want to do many times is against Torah, right? They don't keep Shabbos, they don't guard their language, they don't dress appropriately, right? The list goes on. The list goes on of what they do, or what they do that isn't good. So when a person hangs around with people like that, and you're going to come in contact with people who blaspheme, right? It's also a good word, blaspheme, right? They don't take Torah seriously at all. So this is what it means that when the Mishnah says it's a place of evil waters, right? Evil waters over here means heresy. So this is a whole topic, in and of itself, because non-Jews have a problem. Some have a problem, if they're in the process of conversion, right? And they'll tell me, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, doesn't say anywhere in the Talmud, doesn't say anywhere in the Shulchan Aruch and the Code of Jewish Laws that we have to live amongst Jews, that we have to move to a Jewish community. Comes on the Rambam. So Maimonides says one of the 24 things that stops the person from repenting is if you separate yourself from the community, right? You have to be part of the community. So therefore, if you need to pray, you got to be within walking distance of a synagogue. You have to be within shouting distance, right? You have to be part of the community for good things, right? For good things, God forbid, for bad things, right? The community, as I've heard many people tell me, once they moved to a Jewish community and they were hanging out with people that were like-minded, it's a whole different world. All right, it's a tremendously different world. So someone, so I've had people tell me, well, it doesn't say anywhere I have to live amongst the Jews. So what's the answer to that? How in the world are you going to learn what it means to be a Jew if you don't live near them? Right? Any Noahites, unless they live mamish in the middle of nowhere, right, which a lot of people do, they should be within striking distance of an Orthodox community. Right? The reason is they should have a connection to Jews that hopefully will be able to teach them and place them in the right direction. But if you're not part of a Jewish community, and again, even if the Torah, even if the Code of Jewish Law does not say you have to live amongst Jews, could have been 300 years ago, 400 years ago, if you hung out without living in a Jewish community, you could have learned things by osmosis. You would have learned a lot just by seeing how people act and what they do and all that. Today, that is certainly not the case, right? It's a totally different world, right? So for someone to say, wow, I don't need to live amongst Jews, you're never going to learn about Judaism if you don't. Now, the issue is that, we are insular, and we don't, certainly, here in Israel, Orthodox Jews stick together. Right? You have whole communities of Orthodox Jews. You have in Jerusalem, you have in Bnei Brak, you have in Beit Shemesh, you have all these different places where the vast majority of people that live there are Orthodox Jews. Now, it's not all one standard. Some people are more modern, less modern, whatever the case is, but 95% of everything they agree in. So it's much easier to be in a community with like-minded people. So we had a discussion with my daughter and son-in-law last night for a long time. I was speaking about, growing up and what I went through, and family things or whatever. I said, it got to a point where I said, like, I cannot be around these type of people. They're negative. They make fun. They say all kinds of stupid things. And what do you need it for? Right? So I had to go 6,000 miles away. But I'm not saying a person has to necessarily go that far, right? But at the end of the day, your service to God is going to be much better. It's going to be much stronger if you're hanging around with like-minded people. Now, this is a serious issue within the Noahide movement, because we're speaking to Noahides, right? And that is, there are very few communities, if any, where people can come to a place to learn, right? To a learning center. Most people are doing things virtually. They meet people here, they meet people there, but in general, most people live in the middle of nowhere, or in my language, they live in the boonies, or the boondocks, as we'd say in Boston. So therefore, the problem is they don't fit in with Jews, they don't fit in with non-Jews, and they have to be around right? Non-Jews certainly have to be around like-minded people. Jews have to be amongst like-minded people, because if you hang around with people that don't take Torah seriously, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is the more that you have an influence on them, they will certainly have an influence on you, in a negative way. You just become more lax. You become part of, the society and whatever. I'll give an example. I went to, when I went from, I was in South America, in Chile, and I went to Lakewood, which is one of the strongest Orthodox communities in America, in New Jersey. And I had my Jewish education was in Israel, right? Was more or less here in Israel. So I learned by great people, hung out with great people. So that had tremendous influence on my life. So when I got back to Lakewood, now there were very, very religious people there, right? Certainly not saying not. And when they heard me speak, some people said, "Oh, don't worry. When you're here long enough, you'll be just like everybody else." Now again, these were Orthodox Jews. They wear tefillin every day. They pray every day. They say blessings. They honor their parents. They keep kosher. They do all these mitzvahs. But like we always say, America's America. Outside of Israel is outside of Israel. The two aren't the same, right? You have Orthodox communities in a lot of places, right? But it's not the same as being in Israel. Okay. So I told somebody, I said, listen, my education was here. And I said, if God forbids I become like everybody else, and I get into all the sales and Walmart and Home Depot and all these, and I get into all these different things, and Torah sort of becomes like a secondary thing, I'll be in the first plane out, right? Because that's akin to spiritual death. So you can have people that they can be Orthodox Jews, but they're lazy, right? They don't take things, as seriously. But we're not really talking about them. We're talking about people who scoff, right? People who mock, right? You don't want to hang out with them. They'll have a negative influence on you. So this is what the Mishnah means when it says it is a place of evil waters, right? So it shows how careful a teacher must be in teaching students. Make sure that whatever you give over, you're going to make sure that it cannot be misinterpreted, right? In other words, even if it's something controversial, I wouldn't know anything about anything controversial, but if it was something controversial, then you have to know how to explain it. You don't leave any loose ends. You don't leave things up, well, maybe it's like this, or maybe it's like that. In other words, you pin it down, you make it as clear as you can. Therefore, you don't want people to come to the wrong conclusion, and that would be a desecration of God's name. So there's a famous story my Rabbi told once in the middle of giving a class. He was talking about this idea. And he said in the name of the Chasam Sofer, right? The Chasam Sofer was about 150 years ago, 200 years ago. And the Chasam Sofer said to his students, he said, if I say something, the Chasam Sofer said to his students, if I say something in your name, it's one thing. But he said, if you say something in my name, he said, you better get it right. He said, you better get it right. Right? So my Rabbi looked at me, and I'm like, what are you looking at me for? And then what did I say? I said, okay, I misinterpret you all the time. I was like, that's good. Right? So, but the point is that you do not want things misinterpreted. Because, again, it's a tremendous responsibility for someone who teaches. And a person has to be careful. Who they teach. Now, one negative thing, there are a lot of negative things, but one negative thing, especially about the internet, someone puts up a video. Someone puts up something on YouTube. Someone puts up something on, on Facebook or whatever. And what happens? Anybody can watch it. Right? So people, if they want to, and I've seen people do this, what they could do is if someone wants to really try and ruin you or give you a bad name, what do? They take one splice out of what you said, totally out of context, without anything said before or after, and they bury you. Right? And they want to bury you. So that's okay. That's not that's not your issue when you're giving something over, right? You can't control, what someone's going to do, right? But at the same time, you don't want to give them the opportunity, right? You don't want to give someone the opportunity to say, oh, he said like this, stop. And you don't see anything in context. And if you don't see it in context, now, if it's something controversial, and a person makes clear, I'm not sure about X, Y, or Z, and they leave it as a doubt, this is my opinion, this is what I think, and they splice that out, and then they splice that out, and they put in the statement that the person makes, so they don't get what they said before. Right? In other words, if they don't get what they said before, that person could get demolished because what they said is not in context. Right? And when I had a Freemason once send me a whole bunch of places in Tanakh trying to show that angels have free will, right? And everything, right, I did on Tanakh Talk, one of the, I took about 6 or 7 of these statements all over Tanakh and went through them, what they meant. 99% was everything about being in context, right? So the person answered, yes, context, but, there's always a but. No, this is not a but. This is what it says, this is what it means, this is what it refers to. Someone actually sent me a question last week about a quote in Isaiah. And they said, someone's telling me this is the quote about JC. So they said, can you tell me what this means? So I looked it up. I said, this is what it refers to. It's like, oh, thank you very much. The context, who it's speaking about, right? So again, there's a tremendous responsibility in 2 ways. One is the fact that a person has to be very careful with what they say, how they give it over, and who they give over to. Because if a person gives over to somebody that's not fitting to be a proper student, and you give over a message and they totally obliterate it and do things with it, you're held responsible because you let them in. You let them into an inner circle. Now, again, back to social media. If someone takes what you say out of context, one second. Someone takes what you say out of context, and they go off and do whatever. Is that necessarily my fault? Not necessarily, unless my message wasn't clear. If the message wasn't clear and someone veers off, that's not your issue. If the message was clear as day and they turn it into a pretzel, right? They turn it into a pretzel. No, it really means like this and that. That's not my issue. But the message has to be clear. That's the point. Question.
Rabbi, I wanted to just ask, based on what you just said about, hold on, we're getting the echo. I wanted to ask about what you just said, people twisting a rabbi's words or twisting a lesson when they don't factually understand it. And I just want B'nai Noach to understand this, because more and more are starting to come and they're not connecting with a rabbi. And I think that B'nai Noach need to understand that a rabbi has the right to be selective, especially with a B'nai Noach. They don't want people that are just going to take what they say, distort the heck out of it, and say it in their name. And I really hope that maybe you could clarify a little bit that I know some rabbis that are so open, but they're still real people, and they literally try to hear, understand before they answer, or even engage in any lengthy involvement, especially with people of the 70 nations. They just don't commit. It's an honor for us to be able to hold on to the hem of a garment somewhat, and learn from a rabbi's character. But we need to be in the right frame of mind to do so, and give the honor, so that we don't mistake what is being taught to us, or misunderstand it, or bring the baggage from our former lives and distort it. So, could you elaborate a little on that?
Right. Yeah. One of the issues, whatever. It's a common thing. It's a good question. That one of the hardest things, I think, for thoroughly in conversion. And even if a person doesn't convert, right, is the fact that they have to lay themselves down and they have to listen to what the rabbis tell them. Right? In other words, there's a mitzvah in the Torah. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to listen to what the rabbis say. Now, even if the rabbis say what's white is black, what's black is white, there's still an obligation to listen to them. Now, people will say, and all you have to do is, do a Google search, and see, like, what do people think of the Talmud or whatever, and you'll see, oh, the rabbi's this and the rabbi's that. They say, they're human, they're people. Okay, right? But at the end of the day, they're the closest thing to the Masorah, to tradition, right? That Moshe Rabbeinu got at Mount Sinai. Now, if a non-Jew, has come out of Christianity, paganism, whatever they came from, and they want to learn or whatever, they have to listen to what the rabbi is going to tell them. Now, obviously, not every rabbi is for every person, right? You're going to find someone, who fits your personality, understands where you're coming from, and all that. But their hang-up, and it's a major hang-up, and I understand, because, they've been defrauded. They've listened to the gospel, so to speak, and they have been totally lied to. So once they've been lied to once, twice, three times, they finally see the light. I've seen the light. Once they've seen the light, they say, who are you? Why in the world should I listen to you? I get people that seemingly are Karaites, that don't believe in oral law, and they say, I'm only going to listen to the Torah. I'm only going to listen to God. Well, that's good. That's not a bad thing. But the Torah begs for interpretation. If the Torah begs, and this is not a proof of oral law, we spoke about that, right? But the rabbis have the right in every generation, within parameters, to interpret what the Torah says. Now, someone coming out of left field, there's a lot of good information, a lot of bad information on the internet, right? So when a person comes out of left field, they start looking into things, reading to things, listening to different classes, that's all good. You have to put things in certain perspective. But people coming out of left field don't necessarily know how to differentiate. Because rabbis come in different forms. Some are more Zionistic. Some will say, if you go to the land of Israel, you help build it up, you're a heretic, right? So you have to know where both sides are coming from. Some people will say it's a mitzvah to go to a ball game, right? I mean, you can't go to anything today, but it's a mitzvah to read secular material. It's a mitzvah to, to watch a movie. There's nothing wrong with it if there isn't. So, does that mean that they don't keep Shabbos? Doesn't mean that. Doesn't mean they don't keep kosher, they don't keep Passover. No, but they have, their ideas are a little bit different, right? So people fit in different, within different groups. You have someone who's Hasidic, you have someone who's Sephardic, someone who's Ashkenazi, someone who is more what we call yeshivish, where learning's the most important thing and everything else is secondary. Whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is that everybody needs a mentor. Right? One of the first things I put on my blog was, don't think you can go through the conversion process by yourself. Now, that doesn't mean a person's stupid. Doesn't mean they don't have a high IQ. What it means is they don't know how to navigate. They don't know what the information is. They don't know how to digest it. They need someone to basically hold them by the hand and go through it. Right? Because in my language, if someone tells them, well, here are a bunch of books, go read them, come back to us in a few months. To me, that's being irresponsible. Why? It doesn't mean a person can't get book knowledge, right? But a person needs direction. And it's not just about knowledge. So, I get this question a lot. People say, why did you call your group on Facebook, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism? I said, because that's exactly what it is, right? It's beyond. It's not just, you just give classes. I do more than give classes, right? People have questions and send me questions. I speak to people on the phone. I deal with people's issues, whatever I can help with. Someone just sent me an email about interpreting dreams. I'm like, that's not what I do, whatever, right? But people need guidance. Now, not everyone, now we're on this topic, not everyone has the ability to give guidance. And if someone asks the question, it's out of your league, you have to know when to say, it's out of my league, right? We're going to see in Pirkei Avos later. One day in the next millennium we'll get right? You have to. There's a statement that says you have to know your place. You have to know when things are beyond you. So my Rabbi once told me, he told me actually a few times, and he said, "Listen, I'm not afraid. If I have to, I will put you in your place." I was like, "That's beautiful. Give me a hug. Give me a hug." But that's a beautiful thing, because if you're out of line, right? If a person's out of line, I can't even imagine me. But somebody, if they would be out of line or say something, a mentor should put them in place and say, "Listen, you shouldn't speak like that. Shouldn't do this." Whatever. If someone wants to grow, I can tell you. With all the years I spent, sitting in a chair and learning and, whatever, what does the Mishnah say? Or what does the Talmud say? It says, who do I learn most from? I don't learn most from my own learning. I learn most from my students, right? So a person needs that guidance. And again, not everyone has that ability. There are a lot of brilliant people out there. For the life of them, they can't teach. It's a gift. It's a gift to be able to give over information, to give it in a way where people can digest it, even if they are, high in the sky type of ideas. You water it down, and you give people the message that they need. But people, especially being a Noahide, I don't think there's any question. You got to put ego aside. And I had to do this. I was a junior in college at an Ivy League school, Columbia University, came to learn in yeshiva, and I knew Hebrew. I knew how to read Hebrew. Didn't know anything about Mishnah. Didn't know anything about Talmud. He called out in class, "Okay, Coffman, read the Mishnah." I was like, no, I'll take the 0. He's like, no, you read it and you explain it. Right? So here I am, a hotshot, thinking I'm like, God's gift to the world. And then, you got to explain something that, is beyond you. Or whatever, you have to learn and, and all that. But I wouldn't have gotten anywhere, without proper guidance, And, I'll just tell, one quick story, how I, developed a connection to one of the Torah giants, of this generation. And that is that, I wanted to ask him, a bunch of questions. And I didn't really know who he was at the time. And in short, he told me that I'm an old man, you should take my advice, and he gave me certain advice, and he basically crushed my dream in about 30 seconds. So I told him in somewhat of a chutzpahdik way, I said, if I'm going to listen, and the fact that you just destroyed my dream, if I'm going to listen, and I'm going to lay myself down and listen to what the Rav has to say, and follow through, then you're going to have to be the one to teach me. That's what I told him. Now he kept telling me I'm so busy, I'm this, I'm that. Anyway, I didn't take no for an answer. I pushed my foot in the door, or jammed it in the door, and that's how I developed this, this connection more than 20 years later. Now I learned under somebody else for many years, and he got me to a certain place, which I have tremendous amount of gratitude, no question about that. Helped me many, many different ways. When I get to my Rebbe, it was a different world. It was, you're talking a totally different world. He showed me things that even his grandkids will never see in 10 lifetimes, right? That I was able to benefit from. But how did I get there? Okay, chutzpah is one thing, right? But what I don't necessarily recommend people do, but the other was I was willing to lay myself down to, okay, you direct me, you help me, I'm going to take whatever you tell me to do. This is what I'm going to do. I'm coming to you with all my questions, across the board, whether it's kashrus, whether it's blessing, whether it's philosophy. I've asked them a lot of things in Jewish philosophy and, other things. That's how you get somewhere, right? Because you have someone with vast knowledge and, and hopefully experience. And what they can do is they can open up doors. Right? They can give you, proper guidance. Now again, not everybody has that ability to do, to do so, right? So therefore, a person, certainly has to be careful. You have to know what we spoke about before, right? Someone who's a fraud, and they don't have credentials, and and all that. But for a Noahide, it's something where a lot of information out there is very skewed. There's not that much information. What can they do? What can't they do? How should they do? Right? Etc. And it's a very frustrating thing, right? It's certainly a very frustrating thing. So, especially today, a person always needs, and we all need this. We need to live inspired, right? We need to, as you saw in the introduction in the Energizer Bunny, you got to live inspired. You just got to keep going, no matter what God throws at you. An evil inclination throws at you. You still, you have to go, you have to want, you have to strive, and all that. You can't do it by yourself. And at a certain point, a person has, requisite knowledge. Okay, but in cases where a person has a doubt, you're not sure what to do, you have to go to someone, someone who can help you, someone who can guide you, and certainly I can see it's very, very easy. Very, very easy. We've spoken about this before. That it's very, very easy for a Noahide to get 100% totally frustrated. There is no loss, so to speak, no holidays for them. Prayer. What are they allowed to do? They don't have communities. All these different things. A lot of what they do has to be virtual, right? Which is all true. All the more so. Sometimes a person can get so depressed. Whatever, and they say, like, what do I need this for? Like, what is the whole point? That's when you need someone, speak to guide, to give advice, different things in order for them to get the message to be able to strive, in properly serving God. So that, as I mentioned before, that certainly in my life over the last 20 years, I wouldn't be a quarter of the person that I am if I didn't have that proper guidance. Right? Considering how I grew up and family situations and, and other things. And, when I was at the age of 20, I came to the conclusion, myself, without knowing that much about Torah, that either, I have to really learn what Torah is or the whole rest of the world is cracked. And it was both. I had to learn Torah and the rest of the world was cracked. Right? Once I saw what Torah was, I had it explained. I had people nurture me and guide me, and whatever, and how to deal with certain things or whatever. It's a whole, that's a whole different thing. But people will say, well, isn't that like being a groupie, right? Isn't that, is that what? You can't think for yourself? What? You have to ask your rabbi if I can go to the bathroom? Like, I've heard that. I've heard that a number of times. If you have a question, if you're sick. Yeah, you have a question of like what's going on with your body. Who do you go to? You go to a doctor, right? If you're spiritually sick, or you need spiritual guidance, who are you gonna go to? Right? You're gonna go to someone. You're gonna go to someone who's in touch, right? Who's in touch with spirituality. Now, a non-Jew cannot do that with a pastor because you're not going in the same direction. You've given that up, right? So if you want to have a connection to Torah, you have no other choice. The only other choice is to go to the ones that give over the Torah, and that is the rabbis. Again, that means I have to worship them. Oh, we're gonna speak about that because the next explanation actually is a good segue. Is that what this means also about misinterpreting what you say? Is that person not allowed to speak badly against rabbinic scholars? Right? Unless, obviously, they're heretics. If they're heretics, you can deride them as much as you want. You don't have to have a purpose, necessarily. Right? It's better, obviously, to have a purpose if you're going to deride them, but in general, you don't necessarily need one. So therefore, rabbinic scholars, they have much more to gain, much more to lose, right? If the words are misinterpreted. So certainly they have to be that much more careful. So I think that I mentioned before. I think it's a sore spot, for a lot of Noahides because they become very, very skeptical. They're like, what makes your interpretation better? What makes you think you know better? I can interpret the Torah or two. You're right. You can buy a Talmud if you so choose. You can learn it on your own or try and learn it on your own. And I can promise you, if you don't have rabbinic guidance, you will not understand anything, right? And, I know somebody not the non-Orthodox Jew. He learns with somebody, I don't know, every so often, once a week, twice a week, whatever. He learns, he learns Talmud. How much is he getting out of it? If he's never learned before, he's never had a teacher teach him, not getting that much out of it. A non-Jew, all the more so, right? Forget about, I'm not even talking about the language. You can read it in English, right? You'll get something out of it intellectually, right? But you're going to miss a lot. You're certainly going to miss a lot because you don't have someone to teach you. And, and this is the whole, and this is one of the major issues, in the Noahide movement. There are not enough people, qualified people, who know how to teach and give over what they need, right? I mean, I'm not saying there aren't people out there. That there are people out there, trying to do the right thing, doing good things. There are other people who shouldn't touch them with a barge pole, right? They're misleading, certainly misleading. You got people that are rabbi doctors or doctor rabbis. You got to be careful, right? You certainly have to be, you have to be careful, where you get the information from. So again, we've spoken about that. The idea, just to beat this dead horse, is the fact that you have to go to somebody. You have to listen to somebody. You have to get direction from someone. And it has nothing to do with IQ. It has to do with being on the outside looking in. And if you're on the outside looking in, you have to go speak to insiders, right? If you want to get advice on trading stocks, you go to the person who's an expert in trading stocks. That's who you go to. You're not going to say, I'm not going to trust him. What does he know? You're right. Some people are better. Some people are better trading stocks. Some people not. Okay, so you have to look into them, check them out, whatever. But you go to the expert in that field. When it comes to Torah, you have to go to the expert in that field. And it's not Rabbi Sally, right? It's not going to be Rabbi Sally because Rabbi Sally probably has never learned in her life, right? You have to go to the real deal. There are no pretenders here. Because the pretenders are falling by the wayside. All these movements are dying. And it doesn't matter what you think and what you believe. In my language, you can't pass it down to the next generation. It doesn't work. I don't care what you believe in. I don't care you want to argue with me in different things in Jewish philosophy. Does it work or doesn't work? That's it. Right? You have to go to the people who are the real deal. Now, again, that's going to be a hard thing because, you've been lied to. Now, could rabbis mislead? Could the rabbis take you in the wrong direction? Yes, they could. They got to be careful. Right? So we have to be careful, but you have to start somewhere. You want to read up everything about this or everything about that, you can certainly do that. There's nothing wrong. People should learn. People should buy books. People should buy good books, right? And and learn. There's so much to learn, right? But learning, there's a limit. There's a limit to book knowledge, because if you don't have that proper guidance, book knowledge is good. Book knowledge is very good. But some of the best students I had, in the process of conversion, had bought so many books from Art Scroll and Feldheim, that they had book knowledge. They had a good amount of book knowledge, right? But they still needed the guidance how to put things together, right? Now, it doesn't mean all my classes, I didn't understand that, or I didn't, there was stuff they got head on, but there are other things, that they were missing. They were missing, and it's not their fault, right? They grew up on the outside looking in. Right, so I'm not saying anything bad about them, but they didn't learn in yeshiva. They didn't have what we call shimush talmidei chachamim. They didn't have learning by great rabbis and getting insight and learning how to do this and deal with that and all these other. It's a totally different world. That they can't be expected for that. Now, that means you just say, okay, I'm going to take whatever they say. I'm not going to learn on my own. No. You're going to learn, you certainly have an obligation to learn on your own. There's plenty of what to do, right? But at the same time, you got to take what the rabbis say seriously, right? Yeah, you have to put away your ego. You have to put down your defense, right? You have to put down your defenses, and you have to listen to what they say. Now, who you're going to listen to is always going to depend on style. It's going to depend on where they're coming from, what resonates with a person, right? Not every rabbi is going to resonate with everyone, right? Some are more touchy-feely, some are more, or what I'll call mushy-gushy, touchy-feely. Some are more like into direct Jewish law. They want to go, learn other things. It depends, right? Not everyone fits the same. Not everyone fits the same mold, but I can promise, I can almost promise that anyone who doesn't get guidance and do things on their own, you're lacking a lot. You won't get 100% or 70% of what you need unless you have proper guidance, because there's no possible way for a person to guide themselves if they don't know the system. If they don't know the lingo, they don't know what's going on, they don't have connections, it doesn't go. It won't go. And, people have tried it, and they've reached major dead ends. Now, people could contact rabbis and this, and they still don't want to deal with them or whatever. Okay. So, there are ways to deal with that. But, but in general, you have to bring down the defenses. I got people that hammer me all the time because, they say, I bash the Karaites a lot, and, they're going to listen to God. Okay, so listen to God, right? But the Torah says you're going to listen to the rabbis, right? You don't want to listen to the rabbis. I said, I promise you'll get nowhere. You'll get nowhere. That's just the end result. Now, you can claim whatever you want. I don't care what the statistics are. You will disappear. You will not be able to pass that down. It doesn't work. No communities, how much ritual, what are you doing? There are so many different factors that it's going to lead to failure. Right? That's the only place it's going to lead to. So you want to attach to a group that's going to survive, right? Orthodox Jews are the only ones that are going to survive. Right? No one else is going to survive. But it's a very hard thing to do. I don't think there's any question. And thank God I didn't have this issue. When I went to yeshiva, and I was learning, I didn't have that issue. I had to do certain philosophical issues with certain things, right? But I didn't have the issue of going to someone and asking questions, and getting proper guidance where I was lacking in knowledge and all that. So you have to go to someone, who's got a lot more experience. Does that mean you're going to agree on everything? I don't know if you're going to agree on everything, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to agree on everything. You got to get that direction. If you don't have that direction, you're lost. And that's, unfortunately, in the No-Hide movement, a lot of people are lost because they don't have the direction. They don't have direction. They say, well, I can do this, but I can't do this. Or I can do this, and so how much should I do? Where should I do? How should I do? There are a million questions, so I'm going to get them answered. In the end, they're going to say these questions. You're not going to do anything. Right? Maybe you'll learn a little bit and, whatever touches your fancy, but you won't get anywhere. Right? That's so it only took me 25 minutes to answer your question. So that's what I would, that's what I would say. But it's an incredibly important thing, that is lacking out there. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, the fact that I've had it and I've taken it and I've listened most of the time. I'm not saying all the time. Most of the time, I certainly listened. And, I had to go against family, and I had to go against certain things that wasn't pleasant, but I held my ground. This is what they told me. This is what you do. I said, well, isn't that like listening blind? Listen, they have more experience. They know, right? And, even if there were cases and, I had to deal with certain issues that certainly weren't pleasant issues. But the question is, what can I rely on? What can I rely on for this? Can I rely on this for that? And sometimes there was ways to work things out. Other times, that's it. There's nothing you can do. You get yelled at, you get screamed at, and there's nothing to do. You just have to take it. You have to realize, you're doing the right thing. What happens, let's say a no-hide has born-again siblings or whatever, and they keep hammering you. And hammering you. You got to believe in JC. You're going to find out forever. There's that. So at a certain point, you can make a decision. You can say, well, we can still be related and get together. You can't mention anything about JC. Not to me, not to my wife, not to my kids, nothing. You want to have a relationship? We can have a relationship. You want to, hack me all over the place? Like a hack and sack? I don't even think hack and sack still exist. You want to hack and sack me all over the place? Bad metaphor. But, I don't have to do that, and it's a sad reality. But you don't believe in JC, you have less in common, so either don't bother me, or we can have a different type of relationship. It's it may not be pleasant, you may not get together, you may tick off family, they just may cut you out. There is, for most people, that is the reality, unfortunately, because, you're not towing the line, you're not doing what everyone else is doing, and all that, but you have to be very, very strong, very strong in your beliefs. And there was a number of times that, I called my Rabbi, I said, listen, I got to come see you, and whatever, certain things just, weighed on me, and I said, like, how do you deal with this? Like, it's a very hard, it's a very hard thing, or whatever, and, I got advice, and, how to deal with things. Didn't mean it was easy, it certainly wasn't easy, right? But at least I felt I was able to, to unburden, give over this burden to someone who's got much bigger shoulders than I do and can, like, give me a hug. I mean, he didn't give me a hug, but, like, but give me advice and put me in the right direction of what the proper Torah outlook is. Now, even with all that, it's still hard, right? It's still very hard, and you get slapped upside the head by family, by friends. Okay, that's the reality. So, in the last 27 years, that I've been an Orthodox Jew. So yeah, there've been a lot of negative things, along the way, and I wouldn't change anything. I mean, I would change how certain things came, finished or whatever, but in general, I wouldn't change anything, and I'm happy what I'm doing. Happy I got the advice, that I did, and okay, people are gonna be upset with it. They'll be upset with it. It's like, I told my kids last night, okay, made a decision. You don't like it, deal with it. This is it. I'm not changing. We'll try and make amends as much as we can. Whatever. And if we can't, this is it. There's no way else to turn. Can it be painful? It can be painful, right? I'm not gonna skirt the issue. It can definitely be painful, But at the end of the day, having a relationship with God, right? If you look at the Torah itself. You look at what the patriarchs went through. God makes Abraham go through 10 different trials. So it's like, hey, what do you think of my covenant? What a beautiful covenant. His wife gets taken. He has to fight the 5 world powers. There's a famine, right? He has to, God saves the best for last. Circumcision, right? He has to go through circumcision. He has to bind his son, almost kill him. All these different things. They have an easy life. Someone doesn't have an easy life. Nobody has an easy life. But at the end of the day, something that helps tremendously is having someone you can go to take away some of the burden, right? And a person has to let, it's just, I'll give an example. It's like it's like being married. If you don't put down certain barriers and you just want to hide and not feel vulnerable, your marriage is going to be a disaster, right? You have to open up, because if you don't, it's game over, right? Because one person's giving, the other person's not, and and the other person may be afraid because they've been hurt or whatever, and they don't want to do that, and that's it. But if someone wants to grow, that's the direction, that's only the direction that they should be going, because there's no other way. There is absolutely no other way that the person is going to get from X to Y without having other help. And again, it doesn't have anything to do, with lack of knowledge, with IQ, or a person stupid or anything. You're in no man's land. You don't know how to deal with the situation, right? You're coming from the outside, right? So I was also coming from the outside, to a certain extent. Okay, so I got more knowledge, whatever. But then other issues came up. Had to deal with it. I'm not equipped to deal with it. I doubt this way, that way, the other way. What should be done? How it should be done. So I had to go. I had to go to higher authority. To certainly get that advice. Well, I put it on their shoulders. And again, I'm not saying everything came out the way I wanted it to, but okay, at the end of the day, you're not going to get everyone happy, right? You have to make yourself happy in your relationship to God and make God happy. That's what you have to do. And obviously, that's not an easy thing, right? But if you try and go about it by yourself, you won't get it. It's impossible, right? It's too much, right? You won't get it. So that's your answer. You have any follow-up questions to that, or that was good? All right.
I had a point, Rabbi, but I didn't. Yeah, I had a point, but I kind of lost it in the explanation.
So either it'll come up in the middle of prayer when you're in the bathroom. So that's one of the greatest questions to come up. So another explanation over here is that when a person's giving a class, rabbi's giving a class, first of all, we mentioned before that you have to have proper students. Proper students means they don't have their own agenda. Right? Now, I heard someone say this many years ago, and, I thought it was like a strange thing to say until I got older. And that is that when the person had students, he didn't take anyone over the age of 30. Right? Students that he took were much younger because, they still have the ability to listen. Right? Once a person gets past, a certain age, they already have seemingly their own agenda. There's a story. Someone told me a story. It's a funny story that, a yeshiva kid, like 13, 14 years old, he was having a discussion with one of the spiritual mentors in the yeshiva. And, the spiritual mentor's giving over, different things and what to work on, whatever. And this 13-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid says, well, I have a different outlook on life. I have a different sheet. I have a different outlook. So the rabbi looked at him and goes, you're too young to have a different outlook. You're 14 years old. I know, but I got a different way of thinking. I got a different way of of looking at things. Right? So over here, if somebody has an agenda, they have a certain agenda. For whatever reason, they're listening to you. Their agenda is not to get what you have to say. It could be their agenda is, take apart what you say and destroy you. Right? It could be any number of things, but their agenda is not for the sake of having it. Right? Someone who's teaching somebody, the goal of that person should be want to exemplify what their teacher says. Should want to go in the ways of their teacher. Now, is that idol worship? No. We're not talking about idol worship here. Right? We're talking about exemplifying the ideas that they give over. Because otherwise, if not, they have their own agenda, it can turn into a desecration of God's name. So there's a story with Rabbi Yitzchak of Volozhin, right? The son of the famous Rav Chaim of Volozhin. Rav Chaim of Volozhin wrote Nefesh Chaim, the spirit of life, which everyone usually learns the fourth day. It's all about the importance of learning Torah. And he was a famed student of Rav Elijah Vilna, the Vilna Gaon. And there's a story with Rabbi Yitzchak of Volozhin that went with the Semek Tzedek. Semek Tzedek was known as the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. And they went together to the Tsar at that time in order to nullify a decree. Right? What was the decree? The decree was teaching secular studies in the yeshiva. Now, what did the government want? The government wanted secular studies to be taught. Now, most yeshivas today, there are secular studies taught, right? But it's pretty minimal, right? Some more, some less, right? It's pretty, they'll do whatever they can to fulfill the state requirement. But the most important thing is learning Torah, right? That's really the norm today. But back then, one of the things they wanted to teach was like the Russian language. And in Volozhin, this yeshiva shut down because they didn't want Russian to be taught there. Now, what you're going to say, what's the big deal? So what? The Russian government wanted them to teach Russian. What's the big deal? The big deal was it wasn't going to stop there. In other words, if they have a say, they're going to tell you what the curriculum is. They're going to tell you to change the curriculum. They're going to tell you to change this, to change that. So they said, if we allow this, they're going to change everything, so they shut it down. So in this case, this was before that. They go to the Tsar in order to nullify the decree. So the Semek Tzedek speaks to the Tsar in a very, very strong language. Like, he just stood up to him. The Tsar could have said, you're dead. You're going to Siberia. Like, that's it. But he spoke to him in a very, very strong way to get this decree nullified. So afterwards, Rav Yitzchak of Volozhin asked him, aren't you worried the Tsar could take revenge, right, against you for speaking in that way. So what did he say? He said an amazing thing. He says the fact they want to put secular studies in the yeshiva, right? We're speaking before. What's the connection over here? The connection is if a person teaches, right, and the stuff and his teachings are misinterpreted, it could be a desecration of God's name, right? So over here he says that the fact they want to put secular studies in the yeshiva, that itself is a desecration of God's name. Secular studies may have their place, not in the yeshiva, right? You want to go learn a profession or whatever, it's not going to be in the time you're learning in yeshiva. The purpose of learning the yeshiva is to make yourself a better person, right? To learn Talmud, to learn halacha, to fix yourself up, to reach your potential, right? We don't want this in the yeshiva itself. Yeah, 1 second. So he said over here that teaching secular studies in the yeshiva is itself a desecration of God's name, and therefore there was a need for tremendous self-sacrifice in this case. Obviously, you're going to the Tsar, you have to know what you're doing, you have to know when to speak strongly. There was a story, the Chaim, a famous story that they wanted to, there was a certain decree about, I think wanting them to teach Polish in the yeshivas or whatever, and he didn't speak Polish. And he spoke in front of this, this government tribunal, whatever it was, and he spoke in Yiddish. He was crying, like tears. And the judge said, wow, I didn't really know, I didn't understand a word he said. I looked at the Holy Torah, I didn't understand a single word. Frisco kid. Anyway, yeah, he got the point, just by his action. But over here, Rabbi Yitzchak of Volozhin, spoke in a harsh way because that's what was needed at the time. Yeah, question.
Rabbi, I wanted to ask, because you just mentioned about secular studies in yeshiva. Is there not areas where there's overlap? Like, for instance, I know, like archaeology does some wonderful work to uncover some great depth of the history, like they have found in Jerusalem, coins and stamps that go back to the time of the Babylonian captivity when the city was destroyed. I mean, profound, but they don't teach any secular studies at all, like science. There's no overlap. Maybe this is something I really need to hear.
For younger kids, they learn. I mean, girls' schools they do. In boys' schools they'll get a little bit of math. They'll get a little bit of science or whatever. And when they get older, when I was in Lakewood, I was teaching math in the yeshiva. For high school, and they they learned a little bit of science. They learned math. Obviously, like to take the SATs. Take scholastic. Tests to go into college or whatever. They have to take a proper course because they're not going to get it. They're certainly not going to get it. In the yeshiva. Right now, there are some Non Orthodox places that there is a very strong secular studies program. I mean, much stronger, than other places because they want their kids to go to university. They want them to go to college. Now,
but
in all the Orthodox yeshiva, they want people. No, it depends how you look at it. They want them to go to college, right? They want them to go to university. I'm just pointing out the different viewpoints. In the outer Orthodox world, they're going to learn in yeshiva. They'll get married. They'll learn after that, right, for a number of years. And then if they want to do something, they'll take a course. They want to be an accountant. They have to get a degree. They do other things. They'll take courses. We don't necessarily have to go to college. University is not, even though everyone's been brainwashed to say if you don't go to college, you won't get anywhere. You won't amount to anything. It's a bunch of hogwash. Totally not true. Right? There are plenty of people who made money without going to college. I went to an Ivy League school. That doesn't matter. All that information is totally useless, most of it. But I'm not even going to go down that path. A lot of this stuff, if you talk about what do you call it? Not geology, but whatever, like archaeology, and that type of thing. If someone's interested in that, that's good bathroom reading. But you're not gonna have a separate. No offense, because I know you're gonna take offense to it. But or some people may take offense. Why do you say it's only bathroom reading? Because the most important thing for a Jew is to learn Torah. You're not gonna take time off of a yeshiva schedule to learn about archaeological things that prove the Exodus from Egypt. You don't need that. If someone wants to read about it, get more from it, there are people that learn Jewish philosophy that they should, to help them. I'm giving a class for Noahide Nations on the book Derech Hashem. Derech Hashem, the Way of God, is a classic book written by the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Lutzato, Zecher Tzadik Levrocha, may his name be blessed, about the 1600s. And he wrote a book basically explaining why God created the world, the purpose of man, reincarnation, where the nations fit in. I mean, how spiritual forces work. Actually, we had a whole discussion, my Passover Seder about shadim, about demons, and what someone had mentioned something, or I mentioned something that has a whole discussion about demons, and what demons do, and what their purpose is, in spiritual forces. Yeshiva guys don't learn it. It's a hard book to go through philosophically, right? In Hebrew or in English, doesn't matter. A lot of it is, according to Kabbalah, but what they don't learn it because, what do you mean? I'm learning Talmud. I'm learning Jewish law. Why should I learn this? You learn that on your free time, right? But this is a crucial book when it comes to how the world works, how the evil inclination works, what the world looks like before Adam and Eve ate from the tree, right? That's why I'm giving this over to, Noahides that want to, teach in their communities or give over in their communities to have information how to answer people, right? It's a classic book that most Jews don't learn, and it changed my life like more than 20 years ago, because it explained. Now it doesn't mean I became righteous overnight, but it tells you what the evil inclination was like, what its goal is, what the world's like before Adam and Eve ate from the tree. I mean, these are mind-boggling things. Now I have much more knowledge. It's a whole different world. But in general, most yeshiva guys don't learn it. Why don't they learn it? Because there are other things that take precedence, right? For a person to be well versed, in Talmud, that's all encompassing. That's all encompassing, and that's you're learning early commentators, later commentators, Jewish law, all these things, and they're training people how to think from the age of 14 when they start learning this more in depth. Until they get older, and how to think the way the Talmud does, how to make picky details of where commentators disagree. It not only sharpens the mind, can make a person great. All these different things. That's where the focus is, right? In other words, they learn, let's say, from 9 to 1 in the morning. They learn from 3 to 7, 8 in the afternoon. Whatever, prayers in between, and they learn for until 10:30, 11 o'clock, at night. They review, whatever the case is. And they have like a 20-minute session or half an hour session of learning Musar, learning books of Jewish ethics, which I think Noahide should learn also. There are many, many great books out there: Path of the Just, The Ways of the Righteous, Gates of Repentance by Rabbi Yonah, tremendous books, to work on, character traits and character development and all that. So in most yeshivas today, they learn, they learn, let's say, for 20 minutes, for half an hour. But there are ways to learn it. You don't necessarily learn it so fast, right? You think about what the concept is. You try and, implement it in your life. And as we mentioned, the yeshiva in Volozhin, they never had a specific time to learn Musar. Why didn't they have a specific time to learn Musar? They asked Rav Chaim Brisker, right, one of the Rosh Yeshiva there, and he said, if you ever saw the Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Berliner was the Rosh Yeshiva, he said, if you ever saw him say the blessing before the Shema, about the importance of learning Torah, and to see all the effort that he put in and the tears coming down, in order that, God should give him Siyat D'Shmaya, heavenly help in learning, and be able to give over to his students, he says, that itself was Musar. That itself was Jewish ethics. They didn't put it in yeshiva. Right? They didn't need that in yeshiva. But in most yeshivas, you have that. So in more modern Orthodox yeshivas, there's a much more rigorous program for secular studies. Right? Why is that? Again, because these people are going to be going, straight away, to college. So they need that information, in order to pass the exams, in order to go to, in order to go to university. Now, in an ultra-Orthodox yeshiva, you're not going to have that. It'll be minimal. It'll be minimal at best. And the problem is, a lot of people don't take it seriously, and and the teachers are non-Jewish. It's a whole whatever. It's a whole big problem. In general, I don't think it's gotten better since I taught there. But they look down on the people because it's not Torah and it's science and whatever. I'm not, I don't need to get into that. But the point, but the point is, it has its place to a point. And if someone's going to go to university, yeah, they should have if they want to go. If they want to go, they should go to a much more rigorous program. If they're going to sit and learn for a while, right? Even after marriage. So what they're going to do, they'll go to a place that's not the focus. And some people say, what? How can that not be the focus, right? At least part of the time. And the answer is because Torah is the most important thing. And if you want to go, be an accountant, or you want to be a graphic artist, or you want to be an interior designer, whatever it is, 95% of everything you need, right? You're not going to have to get a university degree. Now, there are ways to get a degree much quicker if you need to, certain programs, whatever, okay. And people will claim, about yeshivas that they go, they didn't prepare my kid for college. You're right, that's not their job. They're preparing kids to be rabbinic scholars. Now, obviously not everyone's going to be a rabbinic scholar. So if they don't fit in that mold after a while, okay, so then they're going to have to do something. They're going to have to do something to, to make a living. Does that mean, again, they have to be in this rigorous program or whatever? It doesn't mean that. So I have a degree in history from an Ivy League school. So what? What does that do? I was never going to use it. I never thought I'd ever have to use it. Right? They say, oh, you're going to be a lawyer? I was like, no. If I was going to do anything, maybe I would have taught it. But, whatever the case is. But people have 100% been brainwashed by this idea that if I don't go to university, I won't be able to do anything, and that's not true. Now, it could be, people will want to hire someone with a degree, and if you don't have a degree, someone else has a degree, but you have more experience, they may take you over someone else. But they may say, no, we want to take someone with a degree, but it doesn't mean anything. I was a history major, so I learned how to write papers. I learned how to sling. Yeah, I learned how to sling it, 10 pages, how to sling it and give over information or whatever. Very good. So that helped me in writing certain things. Could be, right? I'm not going to say not. I got certain knowledge. That's true. But, at the end of the day, I would tell you 90% of what you're going to learn is totally different. I had to learn Gregorian chant. It's part of music appreciation. I don't think so. Art appreciation, so it makes me more knowledgeable. I can speak at cocktail parties a little bit. What does that knowledge do for somebody? Right? Again, for a Jew, if the main focus is learning Torah, this is just a total distraction. If not, a waste of time. Total waste of time. Right? So I know that won't be so popular to say, but since I was part of that world, even if you do it online, doesn't matter. Going to the university is a whole different thing, and coming in contact with people. We spoke about, about coming in contact with heretics and blasphemers and all that. And people are not, dressed properly and all that. There are a lot of issues. There are definitely a lot of issues. But even if you do it online, right? Even if you do it online, the question is why are you doing it, right? If the person has to do it and whatever. The one thing. If a person's going to focus on Torah learning for a certain amount of time, that can wait. Are you going to be behind? You might be a little bit behind someone else. Okay, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean someone can't catch up, and it certainly doesn't mean a person can't be successful even if they don't go to university, right? And that is not a popular thing to say, but I think 100% it's true. And I think the majority of people out there have been 100% brainwashed by society telling them, if you don't do this, you will never amount to anything. So again, you want a person who wants to go to computer science, you have to take specific courses. Yes. You want to be a doctor, you have to go through, you have to go through biology, you have to go through chemistry, you have to go through other things. Fine. These are things you're going to have to go through to get there. There's no question. There's no question. For most things, you don't need that. You don't need it. And most of the classes you're going to take are 100% a waste of time. Right? When you could, I get a question from some people. They'll say, how much should I focus on my studies, is going to college anyway. How much should I focus on my studies? Am I learning if it's a waste of time? Well, you can't fail. You're forking over all this, for money. Obviously, you want to do it right. You want to pass. So for the question of studying for a test and you have to pass this test, Torah goes by the wayside, right? Because you got to prepare. Okay, you do enough to prepare. You're prepared for the test. Now I can sit and learn, right? But that has to take priority. You have to balance it, right? Even when I was involved in real estate, give an example. When I was involved in real estate before the market crashed, 2008, I told people, Jews and non-Jews, I said, listen, before 11:30 in the morning, don't even bother calling me, right? I'm not going to answer, right? My phone's going to be off. I'm not going to answer. So, after I prayed in the morning, and after I ate from, let's say 8 o'clock on, 8 to like 11:30, I was learning, right? That was my main focus in the morning. And then after that, I did what I had to do. But you got to be super motivated, right? And you have to know what your priorities are. And again, this also, there are gray areas as well. But it's like I told one person specifically that is not a good student and he really wants to learn. His parents are forcing him and this and that. So it doesn't matter. You still have to pass the exams, right? You can't learn 5, 6, 7 hours a day if that's what you're doing. And on your secular studies, study for half an hour. You're never going to pass. Right, you have to know what the balance is. You have to know how much you have to do in order to be successful, and all that, right? But you need a balance, right? So a person's in that world, you need a balance. But again, the most important thing is going to be is that you have to have fixed time to learn. Now, it doesn't matter what you do. And I told people, many times, person has to commute to work. Well, no one's commuting anywhere right now, but a person has to commute to work, takes you 20 minutes, half an hour instead of listening to the news and about how many people are dying and, you give us 10 minutes, we'll give you the world, right? And all this, what do I need to listen to the news for? Put in a CD, put in a USB, you're stuck in traffic anyway. What's the difference? So why waste your time listening to that? When you could, be listening to Torah. So you say, well, does it know I have an obligation to do that? No, right? Certainly not. Right, but at the same time, you keep yourself focused. You work because you have to bring in money, right? You have to make a living, but also you have to nourish your spiritual soul. So whenever when you're not working or you have free time, if possible, besides family life and all that, you listen to a shir, you get chizuk, you get strength, and that's what it's all about. So I've been in both worlds. And especially the Non Orthodox world. And I can tell you one thing, the more you're focused in the secular world, you will not produce Torah giants. And the reason, I'm not saying they don't have Torah giants, I'm saying they won't produce. Now, I'll give one example. A few years ago, here in Israel, in the rabbinical court in Jerusalem, they hired 22, they made 22 rabbinic court judges who passed their exams and all that, and they hired 22 rabbinic court judges. Right, we're talking about the chief rabbinate in Jerusalem. 15 out of 22. 15 out of 22 came from my camp, came from the ultra Orthodox camp. Right, that means that's 58%. You can do the math. That's 58%. Right, so you're gonna say, oh, they discriminate against everyone else. No, they're taking the best. You're taking the people with the best knowledge, the way how to interact with others, and other factors involved. But this is where they're producing. The other communities are not producing that because that's not their focus, right? My Rabbi once told me a story that when he was in South Africa, he had a disagreement with the doctors. Between him and the doctors, like a 30-year, 40-year disagreement. So he said he finally agreed that I was right. So he said, for that, they call me Dr. Sternbuch. So I said, Rabbi Doctor? He goes, no, there's the doctor, there's the rabbi. He says, never the two shall meet. So I go, Rabbi Doctor? Goes, I got it. I understood it, So there are people that think, when I was in, rabbinical school for a year in New York, there were people doing a law degree and becoming a rabbi at the same time. No contradiction, right? You can be a PhD and you can be a rabbi. Right? There's no contradiction. Right? But, at the end of the day, what do we see as more important? We see Torah. We see Torah scholars and Torah scholarship more important. Now, does that mean we throw out all secular things. We throw out the accountants, the lawyers. No, they have their purpose also. They need to support Torah if they're not going to learn full time, right? But at the end of the day, if you have a quarter of a foot in the Orthodox world, and the rest of, you have 2.5 feet in the secular world, then that shows where your priority is. And therefore, if Torah scholarship is not going to be your end-to-end all thing, right, and it's going to be part of it, but not the end-to-end all thing, you will not produce. You will not produce Torah scholars for the next generation. I'm not saying you're not going to have, right? But you're not gonna produce as many. Even in the ultra Orthodox world, they say if you have 1,000 students in yeshiva, one becomes a world-class rabbinic scholar. Out of 1,000, so like 1 in 1,000. Okay, but you need everyone else around to get that person up to that, up to that level. Not everyone, certainly not everyone gets there. So certainly not everyone has that capability. One example that the Torah says in 2 places about the Levites, that the Levites, when they start serving, one place it says they should be 25, another place it says they should be 30. So Rashi asks about the discrepancy. One place says 25. So what's the 5-year difference? So Rashi says you got to give somebody 5 years the opportunity to see if they have what it takes to be a rabbinic scholar or not. And if you see within those 5 years they don't have what it takes, then in 10 years they're not going to have it either. In 20 years, but you have to give them the opportunity. So in the Non Orthodox world, they'll say, "What do you mean? My kid learned for 10 years, right? Till he's 18." Yeah, but that's the exact time when he's developing his knowledge. That's when he's really being taught how to, how to analyze, and how to make these, picayune details, how to see the differences. That you don't pluck them at that time. Because if you pluck them at that time, you ruin him, right? You don't give him that opportunity. Now, it doesn't mean he can't come back later. It's not the same, right? It's totally not the same. And again, they're different people. As we mentioned before, right? Whoever is going to go to be a mentor, they want them to be able to fit in a certain mentality, right? They have to understand, where they're coming from. So someone obviously who feels that the secular world is the end-to-end all thing, and okay, Torah is also important, you're not going to listen to me, right? That's certainly not my outlook. It's not my world outlook, because I've seen both worlds, and I've been in both worlds, and to me, from what I've seen in my experience, you can take it for, with a grain of salt, for what I've seen, that other world is a disaster, right? Not everything, but a lot of what I've seen there is an absolute disaster, and it doesn't work. And that, in that world, they're very open to like where people are holding all the way to the right, all the way to the left, different things. And, that's, people have to feel where they're, where their philosophical outlook's going to go and where they're going to fit in, and all that. And there are plenty of people out there that will say, secular knowledge, is good in and of itself. And it's always good to be well-read in this and that. But who says that makes me a better person? Right? Even if I read, that book on archaeology, I read it and I say, wow, this is an unbelievable thing, and it makes my faith in God much better. Yeah, the bathroom, whatever, right? But if I was doing it when I should have been learning Torah, because learning Torah is everything, right? Everything has a place. I'm not saying the person shouldn't necessarily learn it, but it doesn't come at the expense of your main learning, right? Now, we're in the intermediate days of Passover now, right? Well, everyone in the States and everywhere else will be, later today, but we have a few days of the intermediate days to the last days of Passover. This whole week is about reading Haggadahs. This whole week is about working on faith in God. Right? And anything that's going to take you away from that, then you're not going to get that same heavenly influence, because, we have to dig in about the plagues. I mean, we're going through a plague right now. You have to dig in on how God runs the world and how God takes care of everything, and read the last few chapters of the book of Job. This is what it's all about. The last days of Passover, about the fact that the Jews came through the sea, right? Going through the Red Sea. Right, and it's all about the miracles. It's all about how God changed nature, right? How God is nature and God is above nature, right? So in these times, crucial to have that proper belief, and that's what we should be doing during this time. Now, a person wants to study, mathematics, wants to study other things, whatever, right? I'm not saying you can't necessarily do that, but again, you have to look at what your priorities are, right? Now, for a non-Jew, you don't have that same obligation, right? You don't have that obligation like a Jew to learn Torah, no question, right? But at the end of the day, I can only say one thing: you have to be all in. If you're not all in, then you're not going to be very much in life, in spiritual terms. Because, I tried to straddle both worlds. And what I saw by straddling both worlds, I would have been certainly nothing in the Torah world. And, I knew what my limitations were, but, when I mentioned before, when I attached myself to my Rabbi, I held on for dear life. I got injections it was unbelievable. I got such injections and strength and, et cetera, over the years, that, I was buying for more than 5 years where I used to take them here, take them there, other places. And I, just absorbed, you just absorb that when you see something like that and you see the dynasty that his family is, the grandkids, the great-grandkids, the cousins, this, that, and his mother, just a side point, his mother was a widow for 57 years. She was a widow with 9 kids in the middle of World War II, right, at the age of 35. And she raised 9 children. Some of them, passed away. But she'd raised 9 children, and they were they were like Torah giants or married to Torah giants. It was like one after another. And she raised them by herself. Absolutely by herself. So the fact that little me, has a connection to that. And anytime I went to a wedding of one of his grandkids, I just saw this huge family and who's related and these great people, like taking selfies, like, come on, we gotta get a picture, right? So it was an unbelievable thing. I always say when Torah works, it goes all the way up. It's such an unbelievable thing. When Torah fails, it goes absolutely to the bottom, right? So that's when Torah succeeds. I had a cousin. Right, I guess I'll end with this story. If you have any questions, that I had a cousin a few years ago, non-Jewish cousin, right? Non-Jewish cousin got married on, of all days, on Yom Kippur. Now, I can't make this up. It was on the holiest day of the year. Now, thank God she married a non-Jew, right? And she herself was a non-Jew. It's okay, no big deal, right? So a family member told me, it's like, how can they get married on Yom Kippur? I said, they're not Jewish. Her father's Jewish, whatever. Cousins, some of her cousins are Jewish. But there were people in my family that went to this wedding on Yom Kippur, on the holiest day of the year, right? So when Torah fails, that's just ludicrous. You want to make fun of me, and you want to say, oh, he does this, and he's a fanatic. And there are Jews in my own family, you know who you are, because you're never going to see this, right? You know who you are that go to a wedding, desecrate Yom Kippur to go to a non-Jewish wedding. That's sad. That's sad. So so people want to say, wow, I'm only starting the process. I haven't really learned that much. Trust me. I started in my 20s, right? Really my teens, but really, I started later. And people will say, well, I'm older than you and this, okay, right? But everything you learn is a building block. But you have to be like me. You have to be the Energizer Bunny, and you just have to go, and you have to learn, and you have to learn, and you have to learn, and you can't let anything get in your way, right? Not family members, not anything. That has to be your priority. I can promise you hang out with, not hang out, but, you find yourself a mentor, right? You get somebody that can inspire you, that you relate to, that can give over to you, that you're willing to listen to. You're only going to go up. There are no downsides unless the person's a fraud, right? So even though things didn't turn out 100%, in different ways, the way I would have wanted certain things, so you got to take the lumps also. You got to say, people are going to say what they want. It doesn't matter, right? You let them say whatever, and you move on, because at a certain point, you say, I just don't need this. But people will tell you a million times over, blood is thicker than water. Right? So what's the answer to that? So, you're right. Blood is thicker than water. I agree. Next. What do I do? And if that blood marries out, you're not blood anymore. You just lost your status of a Jew. Doesn't mean, you have to do tshuva, right? You have to you have to repent or whatever. But once you're out, right? So blood doesn't mean anything, right? Blood can be a liability. If you have a good pedigree, like my Rabbi does, so his mother used to say, having a pedigree, coming from a line of great rabbis all the way to Rabbi Elijah Vilna, the Vilna Gaon, having a pedigree just means you add an extra zero. But you have to live up to it. You have to live up to that pedigree. That's what you have to do. And how did he become as great as he was? Well, he's got a great mind, but he also hung around with Torah giants, and they molded him also. Right? So, it's generation to generation. You have to have a Rebbe. You have to have a mentor, and that's the way you're going to get somewhere. So, when I was thinking about this Mishnah earlier, this was never on my mind. You just never know where these things are going to go. These things are going to go. But again, it's an important thing, and I've learned it in my own life. And if anyone's going to take anything I take seriously, that is one thing you should definitely take seriously, because you will not be left. You won't be left behind. You'll be helped. You'll be enriched, and it'll change your life.
Wow. Well, Rabbi, your line is broken up a little bit here, but we've still had a good turnout regardless, because the message is alive and it's for a lot of people. And I want to thank you for the way you shared this. It's so, we understand as B'nai Noach, especially those that are spread abroad. A couple people commented online, well, we don't have a community. Well, we're at least meeting online. We're at least, and we're learning from a Torah scholar like yourself. We're picking things up. We're hoping that it rubs off. We're hoping that communities grow. We're hoping that light continues to shine, especially during these dark days, like you've touched on even here today.
But even if it's virtual, it's better than nothing, right? Even if you can't move, it's still better than nothing, right? And you should take stock from that and learn as much as you can, even if it's virtual.
Yeah, we agree with you 100%. I think you touched on so much, and I really hope that B'nai Noach communities start to thrive, that people start to have somebody they can chat with, but hang on to the rabbis, learn from their character, learn from who they are, learn the lessons from the Orthodox sources, folks. You can't go wrong with that. It's only going to impact your life, just like Rabbi Coffman spoke today, how things begin to change. But when it comes, I love how you touched on, Rabbi, people that you give them 5 years of study, and if they're not going to branch out into being a Torah giant, that within that 5 years, they could do 10 years, 15 years. Is it really going to, I don't know. What was that one great rabbi who didn't pick up and didn't start studying until he was 40?
That was Rabbi Akiva. That was Rabbi Akiva. But Rabbi Akiva went with this. Imagine 40 years old, and he finally wants to learn Torah, so he goes with his son. Imagine how's a 40-year-old going to fit in a seat with a 5-year-old? How embarrassing! We're an olive base. We're an olive base.
The little
right?
chairs.
But he was. He was able to expound on the crowns. If they've ever seen the Torah scroll, some of the letters have crowns, on top. They don't have vowels, but they have crowns on top. So it's brought down. Rabbi Akiva could expound like 20 different explanations, 40 different explanations just on the crowns. So there's hope. So I'll tell you one quick story. There was a great rabbi who was at a bar mitzvah, speaking at a bar mitzvah. And he was mentioned about Rabbi Akiva and how, you can always start to learn. He was 40 and going through this whole thing. And so afterwards, the person will say was not, so knowledgeable. And, came up to the rabbi and said, wow, Rabbi, that was a great speech. It was unbelievable. But Rabbi Akiva, Europe was a different generation. Rabbi Akiva didn't live in Europe. Rabbi Akiva was like 2,000 years earlier. He's like, but Rabbi, Europe was a different generation. We're living in America. He's not talking about Europe, you bonehead. It's like, bonehead, but it's like you ignorant. He's not talking about Europe. It's 2,000 years ago.
Well, Rabbi, you even talked You even touched on to. Oh, sorry, forgive me. You had touched on today, even how people spin things, twist things, and they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Oh, are we good?
No, that you got to. Yeah, that you got to be careful, right? Who you listen to and who you give over to, 100%.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Well, Rabbi, the connection got bad for a while in there, but we were able to get it out. I think you got a beautiful message. We just went over the 90-minute mark. Is there any final words you want to share with the crowd today?
Yeah, one final word: just don't give up. Right, we're living in difficult times, and we have to grab on to our muna, to our belief in God, faith in God, and we have to try as much as possible to learn as much as possible and put it into practice. That's the message.
Wow, so beautifully said. So, folks, take that to heart. Grow in faith, learn it, hang on to it, and don't be distraught. These are difficult times. But Rabbi, are we on for next Saturday? Are we able to after Shabbat, after hours?
Next Saturday, yeah, next Saturday definitely should be good. I don't see why not. Sounds like a plan.
Well, Rabbi, we really appreciate you taking the time out of this special Passover time to still continue the class. It means a lot to me. I know there's some beauty in this ethics of the fathers. I just hope that people start to catch that, and I love how you're explaining it for us in such profound, clear terms. You're making it very, very digestible. You stay safe there in Israel. We're praying for all of Israel. I mean, I'm hearing there's some bad issues going on in the UK, especially right now. New York is still the terrible hotbed. And, it's trying times. But I think, yeah, like you said, stay close to Torah. You can't go wrong. So until next Saturday, same time.
Same time. Sounds good.
All right, folks. So till then, we'll see you. Have a great week.